Hello, 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 hello.
Welcome to Cinebounce Live, and today we are joined by the amazing Carol Sargent. And Jamie, what are we going to be talking about today?
Well, a subject that I may consider quite personal to me. It's speaking about disabilities and the word disability. Now, Carol is, her niche, her speciality is dementia. But the word disability is so broad, so large, and yet people shy away from it. And we want to really bring that up into the forefront. So, Carol, listen, welcome to the show. When we asked you for this title, and you said, "This is what I want to speak about. I want to speak about the word disability and about disability as a whole." I instantly engaged. I was instantly in with it. Where are we going with this as a subject? What is it that we really want to bring to the forefront?
For me, it's about us using the word disability in a way that it's an everyday word that people just recognize that there's a challenge that a particular individual has to overcome, and that we're working towards how we overcome it, rather than being embarrassed that I have a disability, I need some support, I need some help.
And you said something very much similar before. So before you were disabled into a wheelchair, you never used the word, did you?
No, absolutely. I mean, I've lost my hearing. I wear glasses, although I should wear them a lot more. I now spend a lot of my time doing this. But I wear hearing aids. I'm also quite severely neurodiverse, severely dyslexic, and severely dyscalculic. And yet I never actually thought myself disabled until the day I woke up paralyzed and ended up in a wheelchair. And yet what I've learned since then is the pinnacle symbol of disability is the wheelchair. And yet out of the, 16% or 18%, I think it is now, of the UK population alone, which is registered as disabled, only 6% of those actually use a wheelchair. So the numbers don't add up, but yet disabilities are so massive. And we're starting to see it more now where people are going, not all disabilities are visible. And I think that's a very big message. But some disabilities are a lot more crippling than others. And certainly dementia, which is where the field that you work in. So I think if people were to talk more about disability and other subjects as well. I mean, don't get me started on menopause. I'll sit down and have a conversation with anybody about menopause, but I'll also sit down and talk to anybody about disabilities, because I think the more we talk about it, the easier the subject is to understand, to acknowledge, to normalize, and I think this is why I mentioned the menopause thing, because women go through childbirth and pregnancy, we go through puberty, and we'll talk about it. People talk about it all the time. Yet a woman goes through menopause, and it's like this big taboo subject that no one wants to speak about, and it's like, what that's ridiculous. Then someone becomes disabled, and it's like, oh no. And the other thing I get is, sorry, I told you I'd get on my sandbag about this, Carol. I told you at the beginning. Something else that really irritates me, and it really irritates me, is when people go, "I'm really sorry that you're in a wheelchair." It's like, really? Do you know anything about my life? Do you know anything that I've achieved? Like, I'm not sorry I'm in a wheelchair. So I'm going to hand the baton back over to you now, Carol. But
no, you
really strong with you.
What you're saying absolutely resonates with me. One of the things I discuss when I'm doing my dementia travel and tourism workshops are things like, wouldn't it be nice if you went into a restaurant? You can't go to a restaurant now without being asked, do you have a food allergy? Is there anything I should think about? Wouldn't it be nice if that we had an environment where people are able to ask, do you have an invisible disability that we need to consider? And that people are comfortable enough to say, well, yes, actually, I'd really like to have a seat beside the toilet because I want to know I can find it, in the time that I need. But where we're not there in people being comfortable in answering just now. And, that was a discussion I had this morning. We have a Monday morning group with people living with dementia where we discuss different things to support them to enjoy travel and tourism. And we were speaking about precisely that. And they said, well, a lot of them were pretty, outspoken and, wanted to continue to live their lives, and they didn't mind asking, but there were some things they would be uncomfortable because they felt people would treat them differently. But a lot of their peers weren't as confident in reading the things that they really needed to support. And that's where I think we have to change things. And to me, one of the groups that are the worst are older adults. As far as I'm concerned, if you live to become an older adult, you will have, I'd reckon, at least 2 or 3 minimum invisible disabilities. But older people don't use that word at all.
I think it's all of everything that we've spoken about so far in this episode has been all about how we can educate. And by using the word disability and just like you said, if you can go to a restaurant and say, is there anything we need to, maybe you need the menu in a big font, maybe you need to listen to it because you whatever it might be, it will just make it so much easier. And I think all that education around it is what's needed for it to be normalized.
I think as well, certainly talking about like restaurants, you don't necessarily need to say, you don't need to come up and go, hi, my name's Jamie, and I'm more than happy to help you if you've got any invisible disabilities, because that almost creates its own level of potential awkwardness. But we went to a pub the other day, yesterday for a meal, and there was a big sign on the side of the door saying, we are pooch friendly, which meant we could bring the dog in and we could go, hi, we've got a dog, she's a bit anxious, do you mind if we go and sit over in the corner? Yeah, no problem. Yeah, go and grab that table over there out the way. If they had a big sign saying, we are disabled friendly, right, then that would almost open the gates up by saying, I've got a disability. Do you mind if I just sit over there because of my disability? And guarantee that then, so no one is ever going to go, no, you're not allowed to go and sit near the toilet because you've got a disability. They're not going to do that, right? But it just allows an easier space for that conversation to have, rather than it being an awkward conversation. And I think we got to try and break that awkward down a little bit.
Yeah, because when you break down the awkwardness, then the staff will be happy to ask because they feel like they can, because it's not strange. Because there's so many things that we've noticed, especially when you're out in a wheelchair, that hasn't been thought of. And why not invite people that actually have the disability to be able to say if it's working for them or not? So that's very much the work that you do within your field, isn't it, Carol?
Yeah, and I think that's where, people tend to have a particular assumption about dementia. They assume it's all about, forgetting things, not being able to remember. But actually, because dementia can, damage different parts of your brain, people living with dementia can experience just about any of the, accessibility concerns that anybody with a disability has. And that's why, in many ways, I think it's really important for the dementia community to link in more with the disabled community, because sometimes businesses don't have the capability, because their venue may be listed, to make the types of adaptations to be fully wheelchair accessible. But there are other adaptations that they can make for other groups. And that's where, dementia is an opportunity. If you can start the dialogue with that group, you can get it right for many, many more people. And, that's where I wonder, sometimes if we just focus too much in our own individual groups with a particular disease or a particular challenge, and we don't connect more about, actually, if we all said, like British Rail, you can, when you book a seat in the train, you're asked, do you want to sit near a toilet? That's just a given. Nobody thinks anything about that, do they? But collectively, we could all do that in restaurants, couldn't we?
Yeah,
number of people that want that, and that's really simple.
And the best thing is, there's plenty of people that don't want to sit near the toilet.
Yeah, exactly, and that's.
we do have to end the show, right? But I think I want to leave away with a set one-line thing for someone to take away from this. A one-line message. What would you say that one-line message would be, looking at the subject that we're talking about today, Carol?
Really interesting. We were speaking about this morning at the group, and it was asking the person what adaptation allows them to live their life.
Yeah.
And for you to welcome them to your business, your venue, but ask what adaptation they want, and think that's the thing. And then you get to know the person.
And you actually be surprised at how many people will open up about things.
Absolutely.
And make it much more a better environment for everyone.
So look, I do recommend the show. So that was a great final point. For anyone else watching in, the Disability Fund, or Purple Money, within the UK alone is worth £80 billion. And if you want a little bit of that, then you may need to tune in to these shows to find out more, or connect with someone like Carol. It's been absolutely fantastic. Don't go too far away. I want to say a massive thank you to Carol. Don't go far away, because we've got more shows coming, and we'll see you soon, very soon. Take care. Goodbye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Hello and welcome back to Cinebounce Live, and we are joined with Carol. So today's subject is something that I know that Jane is very passionate about, and I think everyone should know about. So what are we talking about?
It's how to enable inclusion. And it's a huge subject. Okay. I remember when I first became disabled, everyone told me what I couldn't do. I also know that when I first became disabled, everyone told me how they wanted to fix me. But what no one did was tell me how to live. Which is obviously the most important thing, especially when you go through a life-changing experience, like for me, a disability. So, Carol, you work with people that have been through massive life-changing experiences. A lot of it is digressive, I think, is that the right term to use, where people degrade slowly or degenerate slowly. Where me, I woke up paralyzed. So, but I'm right by what I'm saying is people change your opinion of you because you're going through your life, yet they don't actually just blend with you and show you how to live. And this must be huge in the dementia world, which is obviously where you work predominantly, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges for a lot of people with dementia, as with other disabilities, is sometimes they're not able to communicate effectively. And that's where all too often people jump in and make those assumptions and make those interpretations. And to me, one of the interesting exercises I did when I became a dementia ambassador for Dementia Friends was the exercise they did, and it was the funniest one, was with a group of students on how to make a cup of tea. And really, it's not about how you make a cup of tea. It's about finding out how the person wants to make a cup of tea. And if you want to support and help somebody, you need to understand the way they want to do something. And that's where, certainly in dementia, particularly as it's generally, spouses who are those amazing unpaid family carers who want to wrap their loved ones up in cotton wool because they don't want to see them getting frustrated. They don't want to see them, hurting themselves in some way, and they can remove people's independence. And that's the worst thing possible. I don't have dementia. I've supported parents. I worry I might get it. And I've been very clear to my husband and my family, I want to be independent if I get dementia or anything else, as long as possible. And some bits will be frustrating because I like to do things in a certain way, which may seem strange. But if that's what allows people to, get up in the morning and enjoy life, then what's wrong with that?
Well, it's funny you say that, because I've got a bit of a funny story about this. So it's not funny. Well, no, it is funny. It's hilarious, actually. So my nan had dementia. All right, bless her. And she was, my nan was as mad as a box of frogs before she got dementia, right? And she got progressively worse. But one of the things that I always used to do was I would always go in and go, I never call her by her name, or I'd never call her Nan, right? I always used to go, oh yeah, you all right? And then she would usually reply with who I was that day. So she would go, oh, hi, Alan, which was my dad. In which case then I would go, you all right, Mum? Or she'd go, hi, Robert. Now, this was a bit more complicated because my grandfather was Robert and so was my brother, right? So that always caused a little bit of problem, all right? But then I realized very quickly that she called my grandfather Robert and my brother Rob. So I then was able to define the difference. And then every now and again, I'd be called someone random, like Liam or Matthew. And then I realized that they were the names of the carers. So I would then just respond to whatever she would call me. And people always said, like, that was a really strange thing to do. But the problem was, it was like, my nan was like, every time I see my nan, it was like 51st dates. Because every time I seen her, something else would have changed or been changed or affected in her life. So if I had then gone in and go, well, actually, Nan, I'm your grandson, Jamie, she would have got confused. And then if I then said, Robert, your husband is dead, she would have then got not only confused, but then upset. And why make someone relive that grief over and over again? So I just became, I was my grandfather, I was my dad, I was my brother, I was me, I was a carer. I think the only person I didn't play was my mother. But it really helped. And when people talk to me about it, that's the subject of the story that I always share, because it really helped my nan.
You often see this, don't you? So that must be really, so that's where the knowledge comes in again, because you see people answering for people that has dementia, so they can't speak, and they, like you said, they lose their independency very quickly. So how can we support that really sort of easily?
Well, I think it's looking at non-verbal, responses and reactions, and giving people the time and space to show their reactions to different things. And I think that's something, today's society always moves at such a massive pace that we don't actually take the time to do those things. And I think that's the most important thing. And it's, it's things like, the 5-second rule to give people with ADHD, the chance to answer a question, to give that time and space, because we're all in such a rush and we don't like silences. And we don't stop to look at people's facial expressions a lot of the time. I lived in America, and here's a sweeping statement, and not all Americans are like it at all, but I thought Americans were really, really friendly. And on the surface, everyone says, how are you doing? And my husband and I, we used to play a game after time because nobody listened to your answer. So we used to say dreadful. And the people who would take the time and say, oh, what's up? Then those were the people we would get to know, because it was a genuine, how are you? As opposed to, I'm just being polite. That's what I've been taught to do. And actually I'm going somewhere else and I don't care what you say. So, it's changing culture and respecting the individual, really.
Yeah, I think that's very, very true.
And I to be honest, I think we're a long way off from that. But we're not going to change society. And I think that's something that we have to remember, because otherwise you just get clogged up with it. But I believe that if you can change one person's perspective every day, then you're making positive progression. And it is that. It's about, you know, and I get it now where people talk to Charlotte over me when I'm in my wheelchair. And I'm like, you wouldn't be talking like that if I was stood up. So it is.
We were sat at the wedding one day, which was a funny example as well. But the person took it very well, who was blind. And his dessert came, didn't it? And he said, would he like it cut up? And it's like, it's blind, it's not deaf. It's
or stupid.
so it's all of those little things, I think. But I think the reason people react that way is because they just get a little bit uneasy. So therefore they don't know what to do, which is why these shows are so important and these subjects are so important.
So I've got a final question, because obviously we do have to end the show and we're trying to keep them down at time. But I think if someone, let's talk about that subject of helping someone to live inclusively, helping someone to live a fulfilled life. But what would be the takeaway? What would be that takeaway message from this show, Carol?
I think for me, it's giving people time and space, and getting to know the person.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Get to know the person. And for me, adding into that would be listen to how they want to live and support them with that, rather than constantly telling them they're wrong or telling them what they can't do or correcting them, because that's your vision of the world, not necessarily mine or the person living with that disability and condition. So try and look at it from their view of the world, I think would be my top tip. So Carol, look, thank you so much. These shows are very close to my heart. So it's great to be able to interact and actually get that message out there in a bit of a different way. To you guys, don't go away. We will be back with another fantastic show with the amazing Carol Sargent. Till then, see you soon. Take care. Goodbye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hello and welcome to Cinebounce Live, where we are joined with the amazing Carol Sargent and obviously my partner in crime, Jamie. So what are we going to talk about today, Jamie?
Well, we're going to be talking, keeping it on that sort of theme about disabilities and about thinking about disabilities, but we're going to talk about how travel and tourism should be part of your treatment, not necessarily a luxury. And I love this subject because in the mental health world, in the mental health industry, traveling is considered part of your therapy, even though your employer may not necessarily think so. So, Carol, welcome. You work in the world of dementia. From my nan's perspective, my nan was a bit of a, she liked things the way it was. So traveling with her was always very difficult because it would stress her out. So we never necessarily used it as part of her treatment. But how can travel and tourism be part of a treatment rather than just a luxury, which is what society kind of expects of it?
Well, I think it's all about recognizing the health and well-being benefits that people can get from travel and tourism. And particularly if you think about dementia, it's being open and honest and understanding what are the barriers that you're worried about in traveling and going away on holiday, and speaking to people and identifying what those solutions are. So, first and foremost, it's thinking about, how does somebody like to travel? How far do they regularly travel? For a lot of older adults, traveling in the train was something that that was where the holiday started. So actually that is a more relaxing way of traveling than perhaps, being a passenger in a car that's driving really fast in a motorway, which isn't something that they're used to.
Yeah.
So it's really thinking about what is it that makes somebody, anxious and worried, and how can you avoid or limit those things so that you can continue to travel and that you can find, either holiday companies, holiday accommodation that works for, the things you need. And, my experience, I had, I started off with only the experience in taking my mum and my mother-in-law who had dementia on holidays. And then I set up an organization, and, we found that anybody who's still living at home with dementia can still, go on holiday, but you just have to think very carefully about what that holiday is. And that can be hard sometimes because, you're thinking about those worst case scenarios, and nobody likes to think, what if something goes wrong, or that thing that may have happened once, but it's in the back of your mind, what if that happens when I'm away from home? But if you can, have those discussions and speak to people and bounce around, well, what would I do if that happened? Then I think that gives you the confidence, to go and travel. And, okay, if it didn't work, well, then you've learned something along the way. And
would you recommend someone when we were talking about traveling, I was thinking, if someone's got dementia, wouldn't it be nice to kind of take them to places that they recognize, places they used to go on holiday, places that would trigger good, positive memories for them? But would you also recommend someone who is caring for someone with dementia, thinking about going on holiday? Would you sort of suggest try somewhere local first, somewhere a bit closer to home, rather than going, right, I'm going to take my mum on holiday for the first time with dementia, let's go to Australia? Maybe try, Maidenhead.
Yeah, I think it depends on the individual. If that person's traveled to Australia regularly because they've had family over there, and they enjoy traveling, and they really enjoy when they get there, that's great. If somebody's very apprehensive, I would always say do something, small scale to begin with, but always go away for a reasonable amount of time. I wouldn't personally recommend just going away for a weekend, because that doesn't give somebody the chance to adapt to their new surroundings and the people they're with. But the other important thing is, for some people with dementia, going back to visit, old places is good. But equally, there are other people who they want new experiences. They want to meet new people. They want to try new things. And that is, imagine if everyone assumes that you only want to visit where you visited, when you were a teenager, and you think, oh my God, I've been there so many times and I only got to do X, Y, and Z. So again, it's really finding out what the individual with dementia enjoys, and the person that they're going with. And for some people, the important thing can be going away with family. A multi-generational holiday with grandchildren, parents, and grandparents, and then you're thinking about all different things, a mixture of perhaps things you do normally and what your routine is. For a lot of our guests, they love Pointless, so we always made sure we were back so people could watch Pointless if that was important. But it sometimes, it's getting that mix, because people with dementia can get bored if you're doing all the thing, and
boredom as well, right? They deteriorate. So if your brain's not being stimulated, like, it's going to deteriorate very, very quick.
I was just going to come into that, because you specializing in traveling and obviously have looked after your own family members. What are the joys that you've seen in terms of having actual travel as a therapy?
Oh, for me, the biggest thing is when we took couples away, and you'd see one was the cared for, who was essentially just nagged. and the other person was the person who wasn't listened to, who was trying their best. And when you take people away, you saw them at the end of the holiday actually holding hands, having, really fun conversations, whereas at the start, kind of distanced, kind of thinking, really, why am I here with you? So, seeing that, renewing people's relationships and people thinking, well, this is why I put up with you nagging. And, this is why I don't mind if you don't listen to me all the time. That's wonderful. But, the other things are, to me, one of the biggest one was Ron, who was in his early 80s. And was always a big part of our holidays and traveling and everything. And we played I'm Only Human, yeah? He'd never, ever heard it. And he started tapping his feet and then his arms, then tapping it on his head. And he was trying to get his wife up to dance, and she didn't like it at all. But, we got up and danced, and he just loved it. And it's just seeing enjoyment that we all get when people experience something different. And that's what a good holiday's about, isn't it? It's trying different things or getting on with people. People made the strangest friendships that you wouldn't imagine, and that's always great. Great to see. And I think the other bit was particularly the carer, when they saw their loved one relaxing with other people, realizing that there was much more there than they realized when it's just the two of you. Like any couple, when you've been together for a long time, the stories that are going to come out, you probably know the jokes, so meeting new people and doing different things.
It's a new material, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's absolutely wonderful to hear those stories, and I think it's so. And it's so crazy to think that just because you have a condition that is dementia, you don't want to, all of a sudden just be stuck at home in the same routine day in and day out. You still need a life experience.
Soul destroying.
Yeah.
Right, I do have to end the show though, because believe it or not, these 10 minutes are flying by. So Carol, I need to ask you. I want someone to take something away as a final note, right? So, talking about travel and tourism as a therapy, as a treatment, rather than just a luxury that we would like to do, what would be your giveaway message?
So, I would relate it to mental health, like you highlighted to begin with. One of the things we measured from our guests that went on holiday was something called geriatric depression scale, and significant reduction in depression scale. And that's a sort of triage to go in and get treated with antidepressants. Yeah. And, people kind of don't think twice in prescribing antidepressants, but why would you pay for something that has some side effects and takes a long time, rather than just go and do something that you enjoy with people you enjoy and create new experiences? Why would you not consider a holiday, if it has the same health benefits, a treatment? So a bit of a long-winded answer on that one.
I thought about that myself. We do have to end the show, but that was a really insightful final note there, actually. And we've got another show coming up as well, where we actually talk about drugs and pills and those kind of medicines that we all see all too common. So massive thank you to Carol and to you guys. Don't go too far away, because we've got another amazing show coming up, and we'll see you again soon. Take care. Goodbye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hello and welcome to Cinevans Live. We are joined with Carol Sargent, and we've been talking a lot about all sorts of things about what we can do to support people with dementia. And today's a big one. What are we touching on today?
Yeah, it's a subject that I think is all too common, where everything seems to be fixed by giving us pills. And is that the right way forward? In some cases, maybe, but not in every case. So we want to talk about that, about looking at alternative methods. And Carol, welcome. You were really strong about this subject, and I know you've got some real strong history on this subject as well, and I know that you can talk about it way better than we can. So let's talk about it. What have you got to say around the subject?
Well, I'm a scientist by profession. I am Dr. Carol Sargent. I have a PhD. I am passionate about science and spent over 20 years of my life in drug discovery with the firm belief that finding new medications were the way to treat people. But, when my mom and my mother-in-law got dementia, and when you use all the knowledge and skills you have as a scientist, where you have to develop a hypothesis, work out how to measure it, any beneficial effects and any side effects, and then you start applying it to something with dementia, when you realize that, gosh, first of all, it's an umbrella term for hundreds of different diseases that all affect brain function. So really, there's not going to be a magic bullet that's going to cure dementia. That's the first thing. Then if you ask yourself, how many diseases have been cured? Actually, you'll not find very many diseases that are cured. The use of the word cure is probably misplaced for most things. You can reduce symptoms or you can delay things, but a cure is a tough thing to describe. I really and truly think for dementia, when really it's the people nearest and dearest that identify changes in that individual, the individual doesn't themselves. And then when you've lived with people with dementia and you understand the difficulties they can have in describing, side effects, things like pain, a classic example that, we learned the hard way as a family is people's behavior. If they get a urinary or a chest infection with somebody with dementia, their behavior can change dramatically. They can get really, really anxious and very unpredictable, and that's because they have an infection and they can't describe where that pain is. So when you start thinking about how you develop a drug, then my gosh, it's really, really complicated. And on the other hand, the UK led the way in person-centered care for dementia, recognizing that that's the way you reduced anxiety, you induce, the psychotic drugs that were used a lot. It's about that individual. And we seem to have this almost obsession about finding a cure. And, there should be, drugs that affect different symptoms. Absolutely. And there are for many symptoms with dementia. But actually, there's an awful lot of things that you don't need a drug. That it is about, things like cognitive behavior therapy, which is still clinical, but it's not a drug. But, a lot of people, particularly older adults, that sort of treatment, is that really going to help me? The doctor's only sent me to somebody. And equally, if you look at, other countries where, they actually do prescribe, acupuncture, as a way to relax people, mud baths, in the Pyrenees in France, that there's a more open-minded approach, that it doesn't just have to be a tablet that your doctor gives that can really make a difference.
So I should be on a lot of medication, right? as we know, and I tend to use alternative and complementary therapies, massage being massive. And I have had a hugely positive result to being massaged with my condition, and also being active. And I mean, I've got no scientific evidence that because I'm active, my condition has been slowed down, but I have got obvious case studies and circumstances of people that have not been as active and have then later lost limbs or limb loss at a very early stage. So I'm sure there's a to and a fro, and I'm saying this very delicately because I know people who've got CRPS that are very active and have lost their limbs, as I know people who have got CRPS who are not very active and haven't. So there's always, either side of the benchmark. But for me personally, I know that during lockdown, for example, when I wasn't very active, my CRPS was horrific. And then as soon as I started becoming active again, it improved. So I think there's a lot to be said for what you're saying there, Carol.
Yeah. And I think it's not about one or the other, as you're highlighting. It's about a balance and trying, lots of different things. I was watching, there's a documentary on Netflix about different parts of the world where they have a larger number of centurions. And they were looking at, what were the things that made them live longer. And, a lot of those are non-drug related. And I think, often as the Western society, we get a bit lazy in what we can do ourselves. And again, it may be an inappropriate thing to say, but, for, type 2 diabetes, as an example, a lot of that can be down to your own diet. But the assumption is, you get a pill, and equally, we've developed as society pills that mean you can, be, less diligent with your diet. Yeah. So, it's all about taking some responsibility when you can, for your own health. It's like, as I say, I've had one hip replaced. I've been told I need 2 knees in the other hip. But rather than go straight in and get the next knee, I've taken the approach of doing rehabilitation therapy, massage therapy and everything like that, so that I can be confident when I absolutely need that next joint, everything is ready and is functioning as well as it possibly can. And
so you give yourself the best possible chance, right?
I think that's so important about what we talk, because we are a nation of wanting to fix, and the easiest way to fix would be to, just take this and it will help you. And I think that's why this is so important, especially coming from someone like yourself who's been in that industry and understand that industry. And I think we need to sort of look, and if you're looking after people that have dementia and so on, looking at what they respond to rather than just putting another pill and another pill and another pill.
Simple lights, smells, conversation, textures, birds singing, it doesn't matter. We've got very much into our natural oils. And I used to take anti-acid tablets all the time. I haven't taken now. I take peppermint oil. I saw
somebody the other day buying Gaviscon, and I wanted to stop them and say, just buy peppermint oil.
So much, but we've got to use good peppermint oil. It's such a strong.
But not everyone is going to be open to it. So some people just want a pill. Some people,
some people like a good pill.
Yeah, and it's finding out about the individual again, isn't it? What they respond to well and what works.
So I have to end the show. I'm sure you're fed up hearing me say this. We're victims of jumping into rabbit holes, and certainly about subjects that we're strong about with our guests. But it has been brilliant having Carol on the show. So, Carol, when we're talking about this as a particular subject, okay, and I think we need to be a little bit sensitive about it, okay, which is not my strong point. But when we're talking about, you know, the magic pill, which doesn't always necessarily exist, what can we give our listeners to take away with them? What can we give them to get their minds thinking in a different way?
Well, what I would say is think if there are other approaches that you can take, you know, find out more about what your particular ailment is.
Yeah.
Is a medicine the only route? And I think it's also thinking about the cost of that medicine. You know, if you look at, you know, our NHS service, how much it costs and how long we continue to take drugs without necessarily thinking, do I still need them? You know, it's really thinking, can I do anything myself to keep, you know, to make me healthier? And just not assume it's somebody else's responsibility.
Fantastic.
Brilliant.
That was, John, I'm not going to say anything else. I'm going to end the show right there. Carol, it's been absolutely brilliant having you on the show. My brain is looking to explode because I've got loads of people that I think you should speak to. But it has been fantastic to get a little bit of an insight from you, because this is actually the first time, even though you're a member of Senior Balance, this is the first time we've met. So for me, this was an education. Thank you very much for that. To our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't taken a golden nugget from the conversations that we've had over the last couple of episodes with Carol, then, well, I've got nothing left for you, because there was some amazing bits of knowledge in there that we wanted to tap into. So a huge thank you to Carol. Amazing thank you, Charlotte. To you all, we will see you very, very soon. Take care. Till next time. Goodbye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.